Playback, The Lost Tapes. Originally written and voiced by Musical Pumpkin. I remember it very well. It was a nightmare. I watched an entire town tear itself apart. And to this day, we still don't know who or what caused it. It started late one Monday night, but the lead up to it was normal. Everything was as it should have been. The signs started to slowly show early the next day. People seemed sluggish, distracted. Nothing seemed different at our house, at least not at first. I do remember, however, not noticing a classmate's mom looking quietly flustered. That very same classmate, Sandra Willers, would mention that her mom was visibly, albeit not vocally, angry about something. Once we made it to school, a couple of other kids both were casually talking about how off their parents seemed that morning. In between classes, I mentioned to Sandra that her mom might have just been restless, as her dad was away on work. I remember her saying that her dad was returning that day, so I reassured her that there's a good chance everything would be better after he came back. I myself returned home after school, and the rest of the day went on as normal. Had dinner with the folks and my little brother, and then I retreated to my room after surviving the inevitable after-dinner talk. I laid down in bed and closed my eyes. I'm not sure how much time passed. I don't think it was a lot, but I was suddenly awoken by pounding at the front door. I groggily got out of bed and walked to the top of the stairs and saw my dad opening the door and in runs Sandra. She is hysterical. Her words barely audible through her crying. My dad immediately noticed there was blood on her dress. He frantically tried to calm her down. My mom rushed over to her and took over while my dad checked for anyone else. Sandra could barely talk. With a few words she could manage, she said that her and her mom were waiting at the door for her dad to return. And once they had, the second he walked in, her mom produced a gun and shot him point blank in the chest 3 times. Sandra was standing right there. She had panicked and rushed over here. It had happened moments, basically, before she ran to our house. My dad promptly closed and locked the door. Next thing I knew, he was rushing up the stairs and he runs into the master bedroom. A moment later, he comes back out with a fully loaded gun in his right hand. Right then and there was a knock at the door. My dad stopped in his tracks and gave me a nod, then racked back downstairs. He slowly opened the door, and it turns out it was our neighbor across the street. It was Mr. Brent. He and my father were close friends. They grew up together. My father filled him in on what happened. He quickly went back to his house and returned a couple minutes later, his fully loaded pistol tightly in hand. I and my mom were still comforting Sandra, but we had moved up into the master bedroom where it was safer. She was still sobbing, still barely able to speak. My mom suggested that I go meet my dad and see if him and Mr. Brett needed anything. I met with them, who were down in the living room talking amongst themselves. I learned that my dad called the sheriff, and that him and a deputy would be arriving soon. Mr. Brent asked what could have driven Mrs. Willers to do such a thing, but we were as lost as he was. At the time, it all seemed so random. Up until that night, it really did seem like a normal week. A short while later, the sheriff and the deputy showed up at the front door. Up to this point, we didn't hear hide nor hair of Mrs. Willers. Sheriff Dogger advised us to remain here. He left his deputy stay with us while he investigated the Willers' house. The first person the deputy wanted to see was Sandra, of course. So we took him upstairs and he ended up trying his best to get a handle on what happened. The incident itself was so random. So despite Sandra explaining again what took place, the deputy was taken aback. Sandra's parents were probably the most easygoing couple in town. As we were gathered upstairs, I heard somebody run in through the front door. I went back into the hall to see who it was, and of course I see the sheriff. He comes running back. He wore this extremely worried expression. He rushed into the house and went straight for the phone. He picked up the phone, and after a moment his expression instantly grew worse, and he calmly put the phone back on the receiver. I asked him what was wrong and what he had found at the Willers place. He simply said, in a calm voice, "Kid, I think we're in trouble." Doggart had retired outside, having burnt through his third smoke. I was with my parents and Mr. Brent in the living room, and Sandra was asleep upstairs. Doggart's deputy was guarding the door. My father took a drink of his glass of water, swallowing harshly. As he was about to say something, the radio across the room came to life. Though it was scratchy and filled with static, it slowly repeated two words. "We know, we know, we know." After it ended, the radio went silent with as much spectacle as when it had turned on. The room once again went quiet, leaving behind a thick blanket of fear in the air. The sheriff came wandering back inside and took a seat in the living room. He started talking, although it seemed like his mind was so distant, so far away. He talked about his time in the military. His unit in France was traversing roads when they were ambushed. German MG fire lit them up from two directions. His voice trailed off. He then started talking about a rumor he heard about some new fandangled machine Uncle Sam was building. This machine could take control of your radios, your phones, and manipulate what was heard or even said. Finding it difficult to follow, we asked why he was mentioning this. He turned to us, a serious expression covering his face, and said it's because he heard the sounds of that ambush playing back on the phone. Now, it shouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure that through. That was impossible. Despite what we may have thought, we all believed there was definitely something going on. Then it started again. That damn radio just spurred to life, just like before. It repeated a single sentence. Doggart, father, son, son. It repeated this for a full minute before going silent again. This was the first time it had named someone during one of its moments. And out of everyone, it named the sheriff. There was what could be considered a polite exchange of inquiring looks, but the night continued, albeit with a thick, awkward air about it. Suddenly, Mr. Brent piped up. He asked what the sheriff had found at the Willers place. He seemed hesitant at first, but answered thusly. He found the body of Mr. Willers, but the wife was seated in the living room. She was also deceased. He said it appeared self-inflicted. When my mom heard that, she started sobbing. Sandra was still asleep upstairs, but Lord only knows the news she was going to wake up to. That's a nightmare. Losing both your parents in a night in some freak event. With everyone inside barely able to sleep, we were all congregated in the living room. We spoke calmly amongst ourselves until we heard a commotion outside. The sheriff came out and exclaimed it was the Dunnards. They were another family in town. Quickly opening the door, he stepped down and waved them over. They both came staggering in, both of them bedraggled, soaked in sweat. Upon being asked why they were in that condition, they mentioned the military. Pete Dunnard, the father, explained that they were taking a quick road trip. They also figured it would be good for their son, Jack. Upon reaching the edge of town, They were met with a checkpoint and armed guards. They immediately turned around. Their car broke down on the way back as they were chased by one of their jeeps. He finished his story with making it the rest of the way on foot. My dad mentioned to the sheriff that perhaps what he said was right. Our town was likely being used as a petri dish for some fandangled thing that Uncle Sam had invented. Of course, it was only speculation. As I said, to this day, we still don't know what happened. Things happened, none of them make sense together. You could use the theory that the army was experimenting something. But then how did the radio know all these things? Or create these ideas in people's heads that were barely real? After it was all said and done, we discovered 10 people died from what were deemed homicides and from freak accidents. Sandra lost her parents. There was a family of 4, the Cartons. It was a husband, wife, their 2 boys. Everyone in town called them the Carton Boys. They were cocky, but they were nice. Their whole family was found butchered. It was a horrific scene. It's been so many years, and I've run it in my head over and over. It hurts to question it. Just what the hell happened? We'll never know.